Greetings and salutations, everyone. My name is Andrew Kirchhoff, and welcome to my YouTube channel. Today, we're talking about my Week 14 running back rankings for the 2020 fantasy football season. On today's episode, of course, we're going to be covering a variety of topics, beginning with some waiver wire pickups. Again, we did post a waiver wire video yesterday, but again, there was two Monday night games yesterday, one between the Washington football team and Pittsburgh Steelers, and the other between the Buffalo Bills and San Francisco 49ers. So I wanted to go ahead and mention a couple players that I did not involve in yesterday's video based on a couple injuries or breakout performances that occurred last night. Of course, there still is a game to be played later today between the Dallas Cowboys and the Baltimore Ravens that I have not seen yet. So again, just keep that in mind. I have not seen that game. Outside of that, of course, once we cover the waiver wire segment, I wanted to also go ahead and get into the running back position and talk about matchups first and foremost, talking about which defenses are giving up the most points to opposing running backs thus far this season on average in a half PPR scoring format. Then after that, of course, we'll talk about my top 36 running back rankings going into this week. Again, this video is being posted and recorded on Tuesday. So again, rankings are subject to change. There's going to be injuries throughout the week. There are going to be different things that take place, different circumstances that may occur that will adjust my rankings. If you want to stay up to date on my latest rankings, of course, you can either go down in the description of the video, check out my Patreon, support me there. You can get up-to-date rankings, all of your 2020 fantasy football questions answered, and exclusive access on the Discord server for private stuff. Outside of that, of course, you could always show up on Sunday morning, 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, kickoff with Kirchhoff. We're talking all things fantasy football, answering questions, kickoff before Kirchhoff. So outside of that, we should be good to go. I want to thank you guys for supporting the channel. We are still on our way to 36,000 subscribers. So if you have not yet already and you're trying to stay up to date on my latest content, click that subscribe button, join the community. Again, if you guys could, really does help me out if you click that like button, comment down below. And if you're also interested in finding extra access and different content I create, you can go over to the Discord server. We're doing all things fantasy football over there. The link is down in the description. Okay, let's get into this, shall we? So we're talking about some waiver wire pickups that obviously, based on yesterday's games, are going to be a little bit more intriguing now. So a couple of the obvious plays that we mentioned in yesterday's video. Jordan Reed caught a touchdown late in that game, perfectly fine, good to go. Logan Thomas had an incredible performance against the Pittsburgh Steelers and was the main reason that offense was able to at least move down the field and win that game. And then, of course, we have ourselves, on the Pittsburgh side of the ball, nothing really interesting. I can't wait till James Conner comes back because the running game looks absolutely just abysmal without him in that backfield, and it already looked bad with him there. So it's just a tricky side for the Pittsburgh Steelers. In the other game, the later Monday night game between the Buffalo Bills and 49ers, on the 49ers side of the ball, nothing that I'm really too interested in. But on the Buffalo Bills side, there's a couple players that, Cole Beasley, if he's still available, I doubt it. We talked about him so much this season, should be already picked up. The fact that the 49ers did not have their starting slot corner because he went to the injured reserve definitely exposed that with Cole Beasley. But Gabriel Davis, as John Brown continues to be on the IR, Gabriel Davis continues to find value, scored a touchdown each of the last 2 weeks. A pretty good play going forward. Outside of that, the only injury that took place last night that is of value is Antonio Gibson. Now, the issue with Antonio Gibson is probably it's going to be a turf toe. It could literally hold him out for the rest of the season. Maybe he doesn't come back till week 17, and if that's the case, you're going to be missing him. The reason why J.D. McKissic and or Peyton Barber exist is to fill in his shoes. We saw J.D. McKissic last night, 10 targets, 10 receptions, 70 receiving yards. In a full PPR, he's going to get back into that kind of slate and opportunity now that Antonio Gibson is not in the backfield, and Peyton Barber will potentially be getting those touchdowns that Antonio Gibson was getting every single week as he continues the streak of Washington football team running backs scoring touchdowns on a weekly basis. So both of those guys have potential value going into this upcoming week. We'll mention them as we progress throughout the video, but those are the waiver wire pickups that I wanted to mention at the top of the show. Now that we can get into some running back matchups, let's get into it, shall we? I think we've covered everything, if I'm not mistaken. If there's anything else that transpires later this afternoon or anything, we'll mention it on tomorrow's video, and et cetera, all that kind of stuff. All right, let's get into some matchups, shall we? Talking about which defenses are giving up the most points to opposing running backs thus far this season on average in a half PPR scoring format. Of course, the Detroit Lions, Houston Texans, Green Bay Packers, Las Vegas Raiders, Jacksonville Jaguars. These are teams that have been here since the beginning. They do not leave this spot because, again, they cannot stop the run, and it is not a secret. Now, even though we saw performances like Miles Sanders fizzle out against the Green Bay Packers, or we didn't see as much of an explosion of a performance from Frank Gore because he got injured, but Ty Johnson picked up the slack. David Montgomery dominated against the Detroit Lions. We saw Jonathan Taylor and Nyheim Hines both find the end zone against the Houston Texans. And even though Dalvin Cook did not end up scoring a touchdown against the Jacksonville Jaguars, he still had over 100 all-purpose yards. So the streak continues. The Dallas Cowboys will take on a matchup tonight against J.K. Dobbins, who hopefully will continue to succeed as the starting running back of that team. But again, those top 5 teams get torched on the ground. It is not a secret. They get touchdowns dropped on their head, and that is the best matchups that we're always trying to take advantage of. Of course, the Tennessee Titans, they themselves, Nick Chubb, Kareem Hunt, both of them were able to play pretty well, even though Kareem Hunt, as of late, has been really a non-factor in that offense, considering how much they threw the ball down the field and were up so much early. They just had to kill the clock in the second half. We saw D'Ernest Johnson even get some reps in that game, which pretty much diminished the value of a Kareem Hunt, but Nick Chubb continuing to stay strong. The Carolina Panthers coming off of a bye week, still giving up a lot of points to opposing running backs. They'll take on Melvin Gordon, who has put up, 15 plus fantasy points in 2 out of the last 3 weeks. That is fantastic for him. The Los Angeles Chargers giving up a lot of points on the ground, as well as the Buffalo Bills. Even though the Bills, they do give up a lot of points on the ground due to Kyle Shanahan's rotation of sorts. I don't know what he's planning in that backfield, but the fact that Jeff Wilson Jr. is getting just as many touches as Raheem Mostert, and we don't have a established RB1, and the fullback is getting touches on the goal line. It's a mess. Kyle Juszczyk, I love you, buddy, but come on, man. What are we doing here? But either way, those are some of the better matchups at the running back position going into this upcoming week. Of course, we got to talk about some of the tougher matchups, the matchups that keep me up at night, the matchups that scare me. Of course, the New Orleans Saints, the best run-stopping defense in the National Football League, really just bottling teams up. The Pittsburgh Steelers have done the same. Atlanta Falcons, Tampa Bay Buccaneers, Washington Football Team, Los Angeles Rams. These are teams that are, they're great in terms of stopping the run. They will force you to pass the ball, and their offenses are good enough to where they'll score points and force you to have to pass and abandon the running game to an extent. But that being said, there are still a couple of opportunities here and there for running backs to make plays against Pittsburgh, for example. I anticipated Antonio Gibson to play well. If he had not gotten injured, I certainly would have guaranteed that he probably would have, based on the production of course, Antonio Gibson, of course, J.D. McKissic and Peyton Barber in that contest. But again, either way, even the Atlanta Falcons matchup, even though they're the third best teams in terms of giving up the fewest points, Alvin Kamara had a game. He had himself a fantastic game, scoring a touchdown, over 80 rushing yards. And, even though there are tough matchups, some running backs are matchup proof. Either way, now that we've kind of given you guys some perspective as to some of the tougher matchups going into this week, we can go ahead and move on and start talking about our top 36 running back rankings going into this week. Beginning off with our number 1, it is Derrick Henry. Now, I know he's coming off of a lackluster performance, to say the very least, but I think that his performance was based on the fact that, of course, their defense could not stop a soul. Because the Tennessee Titans got blown out so early, it just made it so where he was a non-factor in the second half, considering they were passing the entire time. He only had 15 rushing attempts, didn't get any targets, didn't get any work in the passing game, despite how much Vrabel had talked about getting him more opportunities in the passing game as the season progresses. They just kind of saw it as, this game is kind of out of hand. If we can come back, we'll do so. It'll be on Ryan Tannehill's shoulders, of course, with Corey Davis, A.J. Brown being able to contribute. But either way, despite that performance, I'm 100% still on board playing against Jacksonville, the 5th best matchup at the running back position. They've given up, of course, like I mentioned, Dalvin Cook 179 all-purpose yards last week. Kareem Hunt and Nick Chubb the week prior to that, 206 yards and a touchdown on the ground. DeAndre Swift 4 weeks back, 116 and 2 touchdowns. So again, the matchup is fantastic. We have seen running backs dominate against Jacksonville. I once again anticipate them doing so, specifically because Derrick Henry has a storied history against this team. They know how to run the ball in Jacksonville. They'll get the job done. We have James Robinson on the other side of this matchup. James Robinson will be in a matchup against the Tennessee Titans that give up the 7th most points to opposing running backs. James Robinson has been the greatest gift to fantasy football that I've ever seen in a very long time. His value going into next year, I'm already anticipating and I'm already seeing it. It's just unbelievable, especially if that offense kind of cleans up in terms of their offensive coordinator, clean the coaching staff, get some new life into their system, get a better quarterback. My goodness, are they going to be better? But either way, James Robinson coming off of a performance in which he had a total of 108 all-purpose yards, 30 through the air on 6 receptions, 78 on the ground with a touchdown. Great performance of 19.8 half PPR fantasy points. He plays against Tennessee. Again, Nick Chubb had 106 yards and a touchdown last week. We had J.K. Dobbins, 85 and a touchdown. Giovani Bernard, 78 and 2 touchdowns a couple weeks back. So again, anybody against Tennessee can dominate. And I think James Robinson, of course, how well he's played this year, will continue the trend. We have Aaron Jones as our number 3 running back. Aaron Jones had a monster game. We anticipated him to play well. Of course, the Philadelphia Eagles, their offense pretty much lends their defense no help. And it, obviously keeps them on the field longer, keeps them tired. And when you have a fantastic offense at the Green Bay Packers, just running you over. It just becomes a monster play. That run with David Bakhtiari running down the field, making extra blocks, it was fantastic to see. I mean, Aaron Jones finished with 130 rushing yards, a rushing touchdown, 3 catches on 3 targets, 18 receiving yards. Plays against the easiest matchup at the running back position. Detroit gives up the most points, 30 point, whatever the heck. What was the number? I forget, but either way, it was 30 plus points to opposing running backs in half PPR. We're coming off of a game in which David Montgomery had 109 total yards and 2 touchdowns, and also Cordero Patterson had almost 60 rushing yards and a touchdown in that game. Of course, Mike Davis, 79 and a touchdown a couple weeks back. We had Antonio Gibson, 65 and 2 touchdowns against them. We had Dalvin Cook, 252 all-purpose yards and 2 touchdowns against them. The stat that I specifically wanted to mention, and something that, of course, you guys should know if you are an Aaron Jones owner, because this is the stretch of games in which Aaron Jones should win you a championship potentially. In the last 7 games, the Detroit Lions have given up 17 touchdowns to opposing running backs. Just putting it out there. They gave up 2 against Houston 2 weeks back, both in the passing game, specifically one to Duke Johnson, one to CJ Prosise. They have given up so many touchdowns as of late, 17 in the last 7 games. It's a fantastic matchup. We love Aaron Jones in this spot. We have Nick Chubb as our number 4. Again, Nick Chubb is just dominating. He has had 6 consecutive games in which, of course, he played the entire game, didn't leave the game, especially, talking about specifically the Dallas one. He's had 6 consecutive games of 100 plus all-purpose yards. And 7 touchdowns in those 6 games. He is dominating, coming off of a 17.1 point fantasy point performance. I mean, what can we ask for more? I mean, of course, the game got out of hand. He wasn't utilized as much, and the opportunities were, of course, taken here and there. But I'm not even upset about it. I think this upcoming week, taking on the Baltimore Ravens, even though Baltimore Ravens will have their Calais Campbell and their Brandon Williams back, they're 2 great run stoppers, and we still have questions about whether their offensive guard, the all-pro right guard, is going to be there. It's going to be a question of whether or not this team is as good as they say they are. If they're going to smack up the Tennessee Titans like that, then Baltimore should be it should just not even be a contest at that point. Nick Chubb should be able to dominate. And I think, of course, we've seen him dominate before. If you go back to, I think it was week 2 or 3 or 4 of last season, he had a 100-plus yard game, a touchdown. Has played well against the Baltimore Ravens. It's not out of the realm of possibility. I think he'll be great this week. We continue with Christian McCaffrey as our number 5. Now, I'm anticipating he's going to play. I mean, he's had a lot of weeks off with that shoulder. I mean, the reason they didn't put him on the injured reserve is because, again, they anticipated him to come back. And I think this may be the week in which he does so. Now, the thing that I wanted to point out first and foremost is that they take on the Denver Broncos. The Denver Broncos have given up a lot of points to opposing running backs. Even though this last week, we had a little bit of a shenanigans with Clyde Edwards-Helaire and Le'Veon Bell. It was a matter of the week before. Latavius Murray, 124 and 2 touchdowns. The week before that, Josh Jacobs, 112 and 2 touchdowns. While, of course, Devontae Booker had 2 touchdowns and 80 yards. The week before that, Gurley, 53 yards on the ground and a touchdown. So, Denver can be taken advantage of on the ground. Christian McCaffrey this season in a half PPR scoring format is averaging 27.3 points per game in the 3 contests that he has played. Just to put it in perspective, he has scored 6 touchdowns, 2 in each of his 3 games this season. That is more. I mean, that is just as many touchdowns as, I think, Ronald Jones. He has more touchdowns than, it's just, my goodness, it's insane. The fact that he is averaging that many points, if he's active and he's ready to go, he's an automatic start. I'd be surprised if many of you who have Christian McCaffrey have made the playoffs because, again, not having him for the entire season, not having that 25-point influx as the number 1 overall pick is pretty detrimental to your team. But either way, I'm hoping he's back and I'm hoping he's ready to play. We have David Montgomery as a number 6. It's crazy what a couple good matchups would do to a running back, right? David Montgomery right now in a half PPR scoring format is the number 11 overall running back based on the last 2 weeks of just busting up defenses. I mean, he is just destroying. And of course, playing against the Green Bay Packers and the Detroit Lions, 2 of the top 3 best matchups at the position. Now you take on Houston, the second best matchup at the position. They just gave up, 135 yards and a touchdown to Jonathan Taylor. Nyheim Hines scored a touchdown. The week before that, on Thursday football on Thanksgiving Day, Adrian Peterson, 55 and 2 touchdowns. The Browns backfield went for 230 and a touchdown against them. We also had, James Robinson, 99 and a touchdown. We've seen everybody dominate against this defense. Jamal Williams, Derrick Henry, doesn't matter. So if in fact we have ourselves a match in which David Montgomery is coming in, touching the ball more than he has all season long, 20 touches per game now. He's coming off of a game of 2 touchdowns, 17 carries, 72 yards, 4 catches, 39 yards. David Montgomery, automatic play, not even close. What a couple good matchups would do to a running back. My goodness, I love it. I love to see it. Dalvin Cook is our number 7. You were wondering, where is Dalvin Cook going to be? Unfortunately, he is a tough matchup. But that being said, he is still a very valuable prospect based on his opportunity and touches. Just giving you some perspective, if he had 32 rushing attempts this last week, 9 targets, 6 receptions. He touched the ball 38 times against Jacksonville. Unfortunately, was given a plunge on the 1 yard line. They called him short. I mean, come on. And CJ Ham dives in for a touchdown at the fullback position. My goodness. Just unfortunate circumstances. He still had 20.9 fantasy points. Let's not get it twisted. Like, he still contributed. But it could have been a 28-point performance very easily, with a couple plays going in his direction. Maybe even 32-point performance. You never know. But the only thing that I'm worried about is the Tampa Bay defense. Of course, it is a defense that has played well. And we've seen Dalvin Cook play against good defenses like Chicago and have himself a tough time. But that being said, I've seen him produce. If he falls into the end zone, he gets himself up to 25 touches in a singular game, he's going to get 100 yards. I think that's how good of a running back he is. So again, even though the Tampa Bay Buccaneers have not given up 60-plus rushing yards to a single running back this season, the most rushing yards from a single back this season against them was Christian McCaffrey in week 2. I still think that Dalvin Cook will be up for the challenge, automatic play regardless. We move on to Jonathan Taylor, having a fantastic week. I'm so glad that I trusted his ability. It's starting to shine through, and it's beginning to really pile up for him. 13 touches on the ground, 91 rushing yards, 3 catches on 3 targets, 44 yards, a receiving touchdown as he ran a wheel route down the sideline. Beautiful. Love to see it. Plays against Las Vegas, the 4th best matchup at the position. I mean, just talking about what they've given up. Ty Johnson, was the backup behind Frank Gore. He came into the game, was like, oh, wait, I'm starting? Okay, I'll just go for 117 and a touchdown on your defense. Oh, Ito Smith, the week before, had 75 total yards and a touchdown. No problem. Oh, CEH, 77 and 2 touchdowns. Yeah, we'll just dominate against your defense because the Las Vegas Raiders can't stop the run. It is a fact. It'll continue to be a fact. And I think as long as Jonathan Taylor is the starting running back of this team, he's going to dominate this week. We have Chris Carson as our number 9. The thing that I wanted to mention last week, and I did, was the stat that I had on Seattle Seahawks running backs. This season, and the stat obviously continued. This season alone, running backs who have started and have been the starting running back of the Seattle Seahawks from weeks 1 through 13 have averaged over 16 fantasy points in their performances from week 1 through 13. So every single week, the starting running back has at least averaged about 16 fantasy points. I mean, we had Chris Carson put up 18.5 this past week, 3 catches, 45 yards, and a receiving touchdown, along with 65 yards on the ground. So again, if you're getting 110 yards and a touchdown, a couple catches here and there, you're going to continue to find a lot of value. Carlos Hyde, of course, disappeared. This offense disappeared against the New York Giants. But as long as Chris Carson is getting his work, it does not really matter for obviously fantasy owners at the position. He's going to have the New York Jets matchup, even though as of late they've been pretty good. I still think that he is going to have himself a pretty good performance here. We have Alvin Kamara as the number 10 again. Alvin Kamara doesn't have as much upside, can't be in that top 5 or 6 conversation without getting work in the passing game when we have guys like James Robinson and Aaron Jones, David Montgomery catching way more passes than he is Dalvin Cook. The only issue that I have with Alvin Kamara isn't the matchup, because I think it's fantastic. Aaron Jones went for 148 and a touchdown. Chris Carson the week before, 58 and a touchdown. Nick Chubb went for 114 all-purpose yards against them. We've seen, this defense get mauled consistently. I honestly think that this could be a matchup, of course, against the rookie quarterback, because the Philadelphia Eagles did name Jalen Hurts their starting quarterback. This could be a matchup that gets out of hand and be maybe a Latavius Murray game. If that's the case, then Alvin Kamara could be in trouble. But that being said, still had 15 rushing attempts, 88 rushing yards, and a rushing touchdown last week. 3 targets, 2 catches for 9 yards. Unfortunately, he's not getting that work in the PPR game like we'd like to see. Drew Brees, there's no timetable on his return, so Alvin Kamara continues to be in this little fringe spot going forward. We have Austin Ekeler as our number 11 running back. So Austin Ekeler, the entire Los Angeles Chargers organization was, bonked. They got mollywopped. I don't even know how to explain it. They just got destroyed. As a Chargers fan, as a Los Angeles faithful, it's just hard to watch those kind of games. I turned that thing off. I switched it. I'm not watching that. That's oh man. That's like watching your childhood just get destroyed. It's just horrible. But either way, Austin Ekeler still coming off of a game in which he had 9 targets. That is the biggest contribution that I kind of find and I want to grasp onto in terms of his fantasy value. Going into this upcoming week matchup against the Atlanta Falcons, of course, they've stopped running backs. I know Alvin Kamara in 2 out of the last 3 weeks has put up, over 130 rushing yards, 2 rushing touchdowns on them. We've seen DeAndre Swift 48 total yards and a touchdown against them. So again, running backs have been able to produce and find the end zone, but Austin Ekeler, that's where he finds his value. In the PPR game, has at least in the last 2 weeks had 25 total targets. So as long as we continue on that track, he should be fine, as long as he catches, of course, more of his targets this upcoming week. Should be an easier matchup considering he's not playing against New England anymore. Moving on to our number 12, we have ourselves Ezekiel Elliott. So here's the thing. Even though I haven't seen him tonight against the Baltimore Ravens, I'm not too concerned about his Week 14 matchup. In fact, I think his Week 14 matchup might be the best matchup of the rest of his entire season. This might be the last game you could potentially play him with comfort. Playing against Cincinnati, it's one of the better matchups at the running back position. Myles Gaskin went for 140 all-purpose yards, on top of the fact that he had a 40-yard rush, negated by the fact that he fumbled at the end of the rush. Could have honestly just put up a 200-yard performance on the day. We've seen a lot of players. Gallman went for 94-1 on them. Gibson went for 104-1 against them. We've seen running backs produce against his defense. Derrick Henry, 112 and a touchdown. Kareem Hunt, 102 and a touchdown. The Cincinnati Bengals can't stop the run. This is the last week that you could potentially rely upon Ezekiel Elliott, in my opinion, based on matchups, based on the fact that a lot of the other teams in the fantasy football playoffs have pretty good run-stopping defenses. So if you've made it this far with Zeke, take advantage of it. Play him this upcoming week. We have DeAndre Swift. If he's healthy, if he's ready to go, I'm happy about it, because just looking at the production of course, Adrian Peterson in the last 2 weeks, it gives me confidence. Getting a lot of touches. Adrian Peterson has surpassed 50 rushing yards each of the last 2 weeks and has had 2 rushing touchdowns each of the last 2 weeks. So again, there's a lot of opportunity in this offense. If Kenny Galladay comes back, we could see a competitive game against the Green Bay Packers, giving up the 3rd most points to opposing running backs, of course. Montgomery, 143 and a touchdown. Jonathan Taylor, the week before that, 114 total all-purpose yards. We had, James Robinson, 112 yards against them. So again, we have seen running backs produce against them. We don't need to remember the game that, of course, I think, Dalvin Cook went for 226 yards and 3 touchdowns against them. Ronald Jones went for 121 and 2 touchdowns. They've given up their fair share of points, but regardless, DeAndre Swift, if he's healthy, ready to go, should be a fantastic play against them. Myles Gaskin has kind of somehow gotten himself back into the rotation, has the backfield to himself, and even though he didn't get as many receptions as we would have liked, of course, we talk about it all the time, Ryan Fitzpatrick really likes to utilize running backs out of the backfield in terms of at least getting them 4 to 5 receptions per game. That's not going to be the case with Tua, but he did have 2 catches for 51 yards, got himself 21 touches on the ground for 90 yards. Of course, could have been a lot more, but either way, playing against the Kansas City Chiefs, Melvin Gordon went for 142 yards on them. Josh Jacobs the week before, 64 and a touchdown. Christian McCaffrey the week before that, 151 and 2 touchdowns. We've seen running backs dominate against this defense. I think Myles Gaskin can get it done. We have Kenyan Drake as our number 15. Kenyan Drake in the last couple weeks has averaged a finishing spot around the 15 spot. I mean, he's finished as the number 6 running back. He's finished as number 17, number 25, the number 12. So he's around the spectrum. But the consistent part that we like to see is that he's scoring touchdowns and he's getting receptions. And this is something that we had not seen earlier in the season, which had increased. I mean, it increased our rage for why did we draft, Kenyan Drake? Why did we invest in this prospect? But it also just kind of gave us the idea that, maybe we've lost all hope. Maybe we should trade him. But now that he's finally getting these touchdowns, it's exactly what we kind of anticipated. He's getting the work in an offense that scores a lot of points and has a good offensive line to the extent that they could at least get down the field, score points, and get Kenyan Drake a viable, chance of being a top running back. So as of right now, I'm perfectly fine with it. Playing against the New York Giants, I know the Seattle Seahawks just got smacked. Carson still put up 110 all-purpose yards and a touchdown. So I don't think Kenyan Drake is out of the realm of possibility of performing. He's coming off of a game in which he averaged 4.9 yards per carry. Couldn't run the ball late in the game because, of course, it was a blowout against the Rams. But as of right now, I think Kenyan Drake's still a viable option here. Melvin Gordon, again, I mentioned it before, coming off of his best game of potentially his season. I know he had a pretty good game against the Jets earlier in the season, but this is as of late, in conjunction with the Miami game that he just had. He's really starting to look like he's getting into a really good rhythm. Playing against Carolina, they give up the 8th most points to opposing running backs. We've seen them give up a ton of points to running backs. I think Melvin Gordon, as long as he continues to get touches, he had 16 this past week. I know Phillip Lindsay had 14 total touches. That in itself, a little concerning. Hopefully it'll kind of go more in the direction of Melvin Gordon, maybe get him to that 20 rushing mark. But it's just a matter of what Carolina defense we've seen. We've seen the Carolina defense in each of the last 2 weeks put up, 20 fantasy points a pop. So again, they've been producing well. Just keep an eye on them. But either way, Melvin Gordon, a pretty good play this week. We have Wayne Gallman again. Even though I had no interest in investing in Wayne Gallman this last week because I did not anticipate him to play that well against Seattle, he played out of his mind. 16 rushing attempts, 135 rushing yards. I'll say it every week. This is just continuing to hype me up for Saquon's return next season. But either way, they play against Arizona. Arizona got just I don't know, they got beat up last week. The Rams backfield went for 168 and 2 touchdowns against them. The Patriots backfield the week before, 65 yards and 2 touchdowns. Carlos Hyde went for 95 and a touchdown. They had been great on the ground in terms of stopping running backs all season long except for the last 3 weeks. And it is going in the wrong direction as they continue to lose games. But either way, I think Wayne Gallman, a fantastic play this upcoming week as the Giants continue to try to claim that spot and win the NFC East. We have Ronald Jones at number 18 coming off of the bye week, should be healthy, should be ready to go. The question is, what is Ronald Jones capable of? Of course, we've seen him score touchdowns. We've seen him get vultured for touchdowns by Leonard Fournette. It's a matter of who's really going to be given the opportunity. The Minnesota Vikings have given up a lot of yards on the ground specifically, coming off of the performance in which, of course, James Robinson, 108 all-purpose yards and a touchdown. Zeke, 114 yards and a touchdown. Mike Davis, a couple weeks back, 79 total yards. So we've seen them in the last couple weeks give up a fair amount of points, touchdowns to opposing running backs. I think Ronald Jones should get the job done. I mean, let's be honest. I know that out of him and Leonard Fournette, he is the starting running back. They've got to get him more touches. They've said it. I know Bruce Arians can't be trusted, but I'm just going to hope that they're not wrong and they're not just yanking our chain like they usually do. Ronald Jones should be a good play if, in fact, given the opportunity to at least produce against the Minnesota Vikings defense that, again, hasn't been great all year. We have J.K. Dobbins as our number 19. I have not seen the game yet. It has not aired. If he dominates the Dallas Cowboys, this ranking can just shoot up. I mean, we can go to the number 15 spot ahead of Kenyan Drake for this upcoming week against the Cleveland Browns. If, in fact, he dominates against Dallas. If he's a starting running back, and if he is given the ample amount of touches, I'm all in on J.K. Dobbins. I know what kind of talent he is coming out of Ohio State University. I mean, he is a fantastic running back. They took him in the second round for a reason. They want him to be the running back of the future. Hopefully, they will give him the opportunity to at least act upon that. That's my hope going forward. I mean, it's a pretty good matchup, but we'll see how Monday night or Tuesday's game works to kind of at least adjust accordingly, as the rankings are always subject to change. We have Cam Akers as our number 20. Even though they do play against the New England Patriots, I'm not too afraid of it. I think Cam Akers' touches in the last couple weeks and his snap counts are kind of leading in the direction where I'm kind of getting more and more confident in trusting in him. You know, I wish that the Los Angeles Rams would go back to the ways of 2018, 2017, in which they passed the ball to, Todd Gurley, 70 times in a singular season. He had like 48 catches, 50 some odd catches. If you can get a running back the ball out of the backfield in the passing game for the Los Angeles Rams, you know how much more value they'd have? You wouldn't have to rely upon a touchdown. I mean, if, of course, Cam Akers doesn't accompany his performance with a touchdown last week, he doesn't break 10 points. And that's the scary thing. So again, even though he has scored a touchdown in back-to-back weeks, had pretty good performances in terms of all the yards, all the snaps, all the touches, we are still a little timid on him. That is why he sits at 20 in comparison to some of these other running backs. Moving on to our 21, we have Clyde Edwards-Helaire. So here's the thing. We got tricked. We got bamboozled. I don't know what you want to call it, but we got duped. All week, Clyde Edwards-Helaire was sick with an illness. But the reports from Andy Reid was that he's still going to play on Sunday. He's still going to play. Despite him missing practice, he's still going to play. I mean, I don't really often see it where a player misses all practice all week long and ends up playing unless they're maybe a quarterback. You rarely see that they don't get in a single logged-in game. And he was activated on Sunday night. So we thought, oh, you know what? He's actually going to play. But in fact, it was just a dupe. They did not play him. He didn't get any touches. It was all Le'Veon Bell, and it was a trick. But at least he gets an advantageous matchup this upcoming week against the Miami Dolphins. Again, even though Cincinnati wasn't able to at least take advantage of it, we did see Melvin Gordon and Phillip Lindsay both dominate against that defense a couple weeks back. So again, if Clyde Edwards is healthy, ready to go, should be a decent play. But again, he's not getting as much utilization as we'd like. And he's kind of fallen out of my graces as of late, considering all the shenanigans that that team has done with their running backs as of late. All right, so we have Raheem Mostert as our number 22. So Kyle Shanahan just doesn't really like fantasy football, and I don't blame him, But here's the thing. As someone who just needs to get Raheem Mostert just at least maybe one rushing touchdown to win a week and maybe make the fantasy playoffs like myself, it really hurts to see him get to the 1 yard line and get 3 consecutive rushing attempts to then not score. And then Brandon Ayuk scores a touchdown. It really hurts my soul. But that being said, he's got to get more touches. I mean, you played against Buffalo. They give up the 10th most points to opposing defenses on Monday night. And my goodness, they couldn't run the ball as consistently as they wanted to. The fact that they were down early against that Buffalo offense Josh Allen torched them with 4 passing touchdowns. It hurts. But Raheem Mostert is still a good running back. He still should get more opportunity. Playing against Washington, that is one of the tougher run-stopping defenses, among the best. So again, Raheem Mostert has a little bit of a downgrade in terms of volume and value this week. So that's why I leave him at 22. But goodness, man, he could have had 10 points easily. And that's what I anticipate him to do at least every week. He can get 60 yards and a touchdown every single week. They just got to want to give it to him. But it's tough with so many running backs getting touches in that backfield. We have David Johnson as our number 23. David Johnson was surprisingly decent against the Indianapolis Colts. Even with DeForest Buckner back, I thought, it's going to be pretty tough for the Houston Texans to move the ball, much less run the ball. He averaged 4.4 yards per carry, got himself a rushing touchdown, even though Duke Johnson established himself as the receiving back of this team with 6 targets, 6 receptions. He still managed to get over 10 points. David Johnson, great job. You play against the Chicago Bears this week. Chicago in the last 2 weeks have been dominated by running backs. Adrian Peterson, 57 on the ground, 2 rushing touchdowns. And then the Packers duo of Jamal Williams and Aaron Jones combined for 163 yards and a touchdown. So again, Chicago gives up points. And of course, this offense needs to find another way to score. David Johnson might be that way going forward. Pretty good play this week. All right, number 24 for this week is Kareem Hunt. Now, my only concern with Kareem Hunt is, of course, him not acting on opportunity. He's been given 17 touches just this past week. Wasn't able to get more than 33 yards on the ground. And I think he had 24 receiving yards. As a total, 17 touches is a lot. If you gave Raheem Mostert, David Johnson the ball 17 times a game, they'd be able to do something pretty good. But the issue that I have is that Kareem Hunt isn't, lacking talent or opportunity. He's lacking just delivering on said, opportunity. He had so many opportunities in the last 3 weeks on the 1 yard line to just punch in for a touchdown that he's failed on, that really could have been the biggest difference maker for him being like the number 30 running back to the number 15 running back. That 6-point swing really makes a big difference, and I think he's going to get more and more opportunities on the goal line as the season progresses. But in the last couple of weeks, he really has flubbed on the 1 yard line and has really left his fantasy owners out to dry. That is why we moved him down to 24. I'm concerned about him, but I'm not completely out on him. I still think that he could score any given week and make himself up, considering matchups, a pretty good performance. We have James Conner as a number 25. So he should plan to play this week. They need a running back desperately. Anthony McFarland looked terrible yesterday. Jalen Samuel stole a touchdown. Benny Snell disappeared. They had no running game known to man last night. And that's okay because James Conner's going to come back. They're going to reestablish the running game. They're going to play against the defense that gives up the 10th most points to opposing running backs, the Buffalo Bills, and they'll get back on track. Now, of course, I'm still a little timid on, saying that he's 100% going to play well because, again, he is still coming off of the COVID situation. But as of right now, I'm confident enough to where he's a top 25 back. And we'll leave it at that for now going forward. We have Damien Harris as our 26. Again, Damien Harris had a pretty good game against the Los Angeles Chargers. That's what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to run the ball. He had 95 all-purpose yards, had a catch, got himself 10 fantasy points. Great. That's exactly what we want you to do. Finished. You play against the Rams this week. They've given up their fair share of points on the ground to opposing running backs as of late. And I think, of course, Damien Harris in an offense that loves to run the ball as much as the New England Patriots do right now is the number 1 threat going forward. Should be a good option as our number 26. Number 27 is Devin Singletary. The fact that Devin Singletary went down with an injury early, then came back to life. 21 touches, 61 on the ground, 22 through the air. Put himself in a position where a 9.8 fantasy performance against San Francisco 49ers, that's a pretty good game. Unfortunately, it takes on the Pittsburgh Steelers, but with the Pittsburgh Steelers matchup, I honestly think that Zach Moss fumbling that ball and looking like an absolute bum last night just kind of continues to lend more opportunities to Devin Singletary. He should be the starting back going forward. And even in this matchup, I'm not too afraid of it because, again, the Pittsburgh Steelers, they're kind of falling apart in terms of what they're doing over there. I know they're still one of the better run-stopping defenses, but if you continue to get more opportunities to a Singletary, whether it's on the goal line, in the passing game, he should be able to at least be a top, 30 back. That's why we leave him at 27 here. J.D. McKissic's my number 28. I mentioned it before. I don't anticipate Antonio Gibson playing this week. Therefore, J.D. McKissic really steps up as a receiving back. If it's a full PPR, this isn't a conversation. He's easily in the top 20 backs because of how much opportunity he gets in the passing game. Coming off of a week in which he had 10 targets, 10 receptions, and 70 receiving yards, 5 rushing attempts, only 8 rushing yards. Again, played against Pittsburgh. But That being said, plays against the 49ers. I still think that J.D. McKissic, with the amount of opportunities that Alex Smith continues to give him every single week, is a fantastic play going forward. Should be picked up. We have Todd Gurley as a number 29. Again, Todd Gurley is in a very tricky position. He has a pretty favorable matchup, 9th most points to opposing running backs with the Los Angeles Chargers matchup this week. But the offensive coordinator, Dirk Cutter, has come out and verbally said Todd Gurley is injured. I mean, no shit. Like, we've been literally watching him limp for the last 2 years. And you're going to tell us now that he's injured? 3 years, since 2018. I mean, my goodness, we've been watching this guy limp down the field every single week. And you're now telling us he's dealing with an injury? Of course he is, man. It's not a surprise. He's been hurt for the last couple of years. If he's going to play, and he's going to play well, sure. But just be ready, guys. Get your Ito Smiths on roster because, again, Todd Gurley hasn't been looking good as of late. I'm just throwing him up on the board just in case he somehow comes back to life. We have Devontae Booker as our number 30. I don't like the Indianapolis Colts matchup, and I don't like the fact that Josh Jacobs is probably going to miss this week. Devontae Booker's coming off of a game in which he had 17 total touches for 51 yards. Not a great game against the New York Jets. That offense had to pass the entire time, and I think they'll have to do similarly against the Indianapolis Colts. I don't think they'll be able to compete with them. I think they'll be down early, and it's going to force them to pass. Jalen Richard is, getting himself more touches here and there. Just seems to me that Devontae Booker not the best, total play as of right now, especially if he's not getting goal line touches. We have Ty Johnson as our 31. Even though there is a potential that Frank Gore returns, I think Ty Johnson has earned himself enough of a role in this offense that maybe if in fact Frank Gore misses, he's going to obviously be the starter coming off of a performance of 18.7 fantasy points, over 100 yards on the ground and a touchdown. Plays against the Seattle Seahawks, in which, of course, we had Alfred Morris score 2 touchdowns against them. Wayne Gallman went for 135 on the ground against them. We could see the New York Jets turn this around, maybe pick up their first win of the season. I don't know. I don't think that's the case, but either way, Ty Johnson, not a bad play. We have Nyheim Hines as our 32. So Nyheim Hines had touches. 9 total touches in that game. Not the greatest, but he did end up scoring a rushing touchdown, which saved his week. Playing against Las Vegas gives me more confidence in his ability to potentially score once again and or get enough touches to perform well enough. So again, it is still in the realm of possibility that based on the matchup, he could still be a viable option. But as of right now, again, Jonathan Taylor is the 1A in that team. The second fiddle will be played by Nyheim Hines. He still needs PPR work in order to be the viable option, especially if he's not getting a lot of yardage on the ground. We have Leonard Fournette as our 33. Again, Leonard Fournette will continue to get touches. It is not something that we're, completely disregarding with the ranking of Ronald Jones. I expect Leonard Fournette to touch the ball, but I don't expect him to touch the ball at a capacity in which it is getting out of control and or diminishing the value of Ronald Jones. Of course, if he steals a touchdown, then that may be the biggest differential and the biggest thing that, at least, destroys the entire opportunity of Ronald Jones being a top 18 back. But as of right now, I think if Leonard Fournette can just catch a couple balls out of the backfield, play second fiddle, and at least be used very scarcely, then we'll see just, an okay amount of touches, maybe 10 touches for him, 10 points. Could be a decent option, but somebody that I'm not too excited about playing. We have Phillip Lindsay as a 34, similar to, Leonard Fournette. He's going to play as the second running back of this team. He's going to get touches. If he breaks out a big run, so be it. If he steals a touchdown, so be it. But for now, I'm thinking he is at very best a running back 3 for sure, but somebody that needs to score a touchdown to be viable, and that is why he sits down in this position. Now, another player that has a great matchup, plays against the Dallas Cowboys. We've talked about it. They gave the 6th most points to opposing running backs. I mean, every single performance as of late against them has been fantastic, but Giovani Bernard has been less than fantastic. Not getting enough touches. The offense isn't moving the ball. The offense isn't scoring the ball with Brandon Allen instead of Joe Burrow. You can just tell how good Joe Burrow was with this offense. That was an absolute mess. So again, Giovani Bernard, not a bad option, but again, some of the, I think there's a lot of players that may be better than him. But as of right now, the amount of touches he's getting is something that you can't really substitute for. The last option that I wanted to mention first and foremost is Miles Sanders. Play at your own discretion. I will not be suggesting Miles Sanders this week because he has the toughest matchup at the running back position. And of course, he's coming off of the worst week that I've ever seen a running back perform. It is unbelievable how much Doug Peterson doesn't want to run the ball, and it disgusts me. That I've given up my little spiel on it. Thank you everybody for watching. Those are my top 36 running back rankings for week 14 of the 2020 fantasy football season. Again, rankings are subject to change. I think maybe Latavius Murray could easily be on this list for this upcoming week's matchup. But again, we'll just have to wait and see on Sunday morning, or if you stay up to date with my latest rankings, of course, on Patreon. Thank you very much for those of you guys who support me there. That's basically it. Until tomorrow, we'll talk about some wide receivers. Enjoy the game tonight, and until then, I'll see you guys. Peace.